Hey guys, hey, so we're going to kind of go through some of our drug and substance abuse education today. This is going to be from a coach's perspective, so we're just kind of going to go through our PowerPoint. We're going to look at some different things that we as coaches, as we deliver this message, can talk to with our athletes and kind of talk about. And then we're going to provide some examples on how you may be able to split this up into multiple lessons. So let's go ahead and pull this up really quick. Share screen. Share. All right. So like I said, we're going to kind of talk a lot about what we're doing and what we can do to kind of talk to our athletes regarding different things with substance abuse. There's a lot of different things out there. So, you know, we're really wanting to make sure that they're equipped with the power of choice and make positive decisions regarding outside things that they're going to encounter when they're in the area. So the first thing we'll do when we lead off is to talk about choice. So the biggest power we have in life is the power of choice. We get to choose kind of what clothes we wear, the food that we eat, basically any direction that our life takes. One of the most important things that we can do is decide on how we're going to live our life. What company are we going to keep? You know, what are we going to study? What are we going to participate in? The participation and who we run with is really going to dictate the situations that we're put in. Okay, so if we're running with some really tough crowds, we're going to be put in some really sticky situations that may be a little bit more risky. Okay, in regard to drugs and alcohol for athletes, there's short and long-term consequences to this. You know, short-term consequences may be just affecting my readiness on a day-to-day basis, whereas long-term changes and effects and impacts that may occur from use of drugs and alcohol may change the physiology of my body and my long-term preparedness and readiness throughout my career. And it really may handicap some things outside of athletics as well. We want to root everything in choice. We already talked about that. One thing you can use when you're talking to your student athletes is this idea of the person that you are will determine the athlete you'll become. Even bigger is the team that we are, and the people that we are will determine the team that we'll become. So that's kind of going back to the whole idea of choice. If I can really perfect my habits outside of training, it'll really bleed onto the field or court or wherever I'm participating in. Okay. I think this is a great opportunity for us as well to kind of talk about there's 24 hours in a day. In NCAA, the most we can have our athletes is about 4 hours a day. So that leaves 20 hours for decisions that they actually have to make on their own. So we need to make sure that they're aware that they have much more time on their own where they can make or break their career. So in this presentation, you'll notice dice throughout. Okay, so we want to potentially equate the idea of using different substances as a form of gambling. So there's a risk benefit. Okay, so not every single time that you may use a substance, it may impact you. But that one time that you roll the dice with using a substance, it really may change the way that your body reacts, and it really can hamper your overall preparedness to participate in the sport. Plus, going back to the whole idea of the company that you keep, you know, as you engage in more risky behavior, you're going to be around some risky people. So again, going back to rolling the dice the whole time, we need to kind of think about that every time we put a substance in our body. So if we look a little bit more at a drug is basically any substance other than a food that is inhaled, injected, smoked, consumed, absorbed, or dissolved, which cause physiological and most often psychological changes in the body. Okay, so basically it's going to alter the body's natural function. Okay, there are different types of administration of drugs that we just mentioned. You have inhalation, so smoking, injection with a hypodermic needle. You have like snorting through the nose, that's called insufflation. You can take a drug orally, like pill or liquid format. You can take it rectally, which would be up the rectum or colon. and you can take it topically, like in some sort of gel or lotion, something that would be absorbed through the skin. Okay? Some common uses for drugs are obviously the obvious with medication. You know, these are prescribed medicines over the counter. I think the different types of drugs, depending on whether they have to be prescribed with a script or you can get them over the counter, depends on their overall side effects and the impacts that that can have if used improperly. Okay? There's also spiritual and religious use. This dates back a long, long time ago with history. You know, different cultures, different subcultures had different beliefs that put them using drugs to potentially worship or look to a higher power. Also in the form of fellowship within different cultures and peoples around the world. You have designer drugs and smart drugs. These are kind of used to improve memory, potentially concentration, thought, mood, increase the ability to learn over time. Sometimes these drugs are often used with the treatment of Parkinson's disease or maybe Alzheimer's, and oftentimes ADHD. These would be like your Ritalins, your Adderalls that really increase focus. Okay, some of these designer drugs are very expensive, where other drugs are very easily obtainable. So these designer drugs are also called smart drugs. And then the last category that we have up here are recreational drugs. And recreational drugs are basically used to intentionally change the state of mind of a person, whether up or down, whatever direction that may be. But that has major, major influences on the central nervous system with the hopes of changing feelings or perceptions of reality. Some commonly used drugs, we won't go all the way down through here, but it's important to kind of note that drug use can depend on a lot of things. One may be socioeconomic status. Another one may be culture and background. So dependent on where a person's from, what they're brought up around, you know, what their parents or people close to them are participating in, and then maybe the opportunities that they had, whether it be financially or just experiences. The next one would be a geographical setting. Certain drugs are a little bit more common in certain areas, such as hot places versus outside places. You know, drugs like marijuana, a little bit closer to the equator, are a little bit more common than some of your other different types of recreational drugs, just because of the propensity of having that drug and growing it in warmer climates. And then obviously opportunity. If opportunity exists to have a drug, that's really going to change the way our athletes can potentially be around. We always talk about athletic performance as a combination of three things. One would be genetics or God-given ability. The next one would be hard work. And the third area, that is opportunity. So if I don't have opportunity, let's say I'm a hockey player and then I'm in the South, there's not a lot of ice rinks out here. So I'm probably not going to be around ice or hockey as much. The same thing holds true with drugs. If I'm not in a situation where there's a lot of drugs, or I don't put myself in a place where there's risky behavior, my likelihood of using drugs may be down. The opposite may be also true. If I'm always in a situation where the opportunity is there, especially if I have had some past experiences where there's been some negative issues, that'll really impact me and potentially lead me to use drugs. So if you look at the way that drugs, and when we say drugs in this sense, anything that's changing our body, focus, and anything that may be, anything that's changing the body, whether physiologically or psychologically, that's what we're thinking about drugs here. But drugs essentially invade normal processes within the body and change the way different receptors and messages are sent through the body. Okay, these really impact the cerebral cortex. So basically that may actually increase the cellular activity within the cortex, which may cause or increase the impact of impulses received or transmitted across different parts of the body. And that may actually lead to hallucinations and different impacts from the drug. It can impact the thalamus, which is basically the relay center of the brain. The thalamus is the center for sensations such as whether I agree with something or disagree with something. So as I have drugs that may alter the thalamus, that can really make me very argumentative or not agreeable with different types of people, even if my normal personality was the opposite. It can really impact the hypothalamus. So basically, The hypothalamus controls different things such as temperature, fat, carbohydrate metabolism, hunger, even pleasure and pain. So drugs that are going to target the hypothalamus are really going to change the way that I perceive these different types of feelings to be when I'm not on drugs. So that's a really kind of scary thing. So with that too, certain drugs like an upper or maybe like an amphetamine, for an example, may actually stimulate this area. And for us in athletics, where it's important for us to manage body weight and to be consistent over time, if I stimulate this area, I may actually have a feeling where I'm not hungry, and that may lead me to not even eat. The same thing holds true even with a drug that's not as dangerous as like an amphetamine, but like caffeine. Caffeine would impact the hypothalamus in the same manner by causing a feeling of satiety and not feeling hungry. That can be just a really small impact on athletics over time, but that is really a great example of how it can really impact inside the body and immediately change the way we are participating and preparing for athletics. It can really change the limbic system as well. The limbic system includes the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and other structures around that area. And basically the limbic system is the site of memory and maybe emotions as well, argue some people. But basically drugs associated with impacting this area may impact your pleasure, different feelings of anger, joy. You may have mood swings. But basically the whole idea here is to talk about different types of drugs, maybe more importantly, the combination of different types of drugs, depending on the levels of drugs, can really impact every different type of system within our body over time. Okay. This is fascinating to think too, is when we take drugs, it throws off what we call neurotransmission. So we have neurons throughout the body, and neurons are responsible for sending messages from the brain to different parts of the body. They run the length of our spinal cord and emanate outside from midline to pass along messages. An interesting thing about neurons is they don't connect. There's a small synaptic cleft between neurons. So if I have a neuron here and a neuron here, there's a synaptic cleft, and that's a space in between. They rely on what's called neurotransmitters. Okay, so small little chemicals that are charged, and they go from one end of a neuron to the other end of a neuron to pass that message along. So we need to make sure that we have positive neurotransmission to keep the message going on down the line. Now, the thing about drugs can actually invade the synaptic cleft and change or alter the way that these messages are sent on down the line. So this is a neat little illustration here. You can really see the green areas just kind of clog it up. Now, it's also interesting to point out that some drugs will speed up that message as well, and that can cause irritability, anxiety, and an altered movement patterns, whereas other drugs can slow down or shunt the message over time throughout this cleft and really dramatically change the way that message is sent. So just looking at a couple little drugs before we finish this first unit. The first one would be a stimulant. So a stimulant is basically anything that temporarily raises the levels of physiological nervous system activity. Okay, so with this, that may be nicotine, it could be caffeine, it could be an amphetamine, and those are just ramping up the body. Okay, so it's increasing the overall alertness of the body. It's ramping up all systems, basically pushing the sympathetic system right now. Okay? Some short-term effects of using stimulants are an intense and immediate feeling of happiness or euphoria. And you also have increased energy and maybe even an increased self-esteem or confidence. These oftentimes improve attention. So like if I take a cup of coffee, it may improve temporarily my attention span within a given topic. They're also thought to have impacts on sexual desire and performance too. Maybe some harder drugs like some amphetamines that can drastically impact the way that people are thinking and feeling, and even outside their norms. So that's kind of a dangerous area. They actually can help open breathing passages and make breathing easier. And they will, like we talked about a minute ago with the whole idea of satiety and not being hungry, they can suppress appetite. Some long-term effects, you're going to potentially have some increased heart rate or heightened blood pressure. That can be both short-term and long-term. If used over the long term, you may actually have some long-term irritability and just have maybe some ability to, or the inability to fall asleep and to stay asleep. You may have just general anxiety while you're sitting down and not on task. You can have extreme weight loss. So for athletes that we're trying to maintain a body weight, especially in season, we may have some weight loss over time, generally speaking, because maybe they're not eating, they're not hungry. And then with increased activities, maybe they're becoming more active and they're not sitting down as much, so they potentially could be burning more calories. Also in there are some issues such as chronic headaches, breathing problems, stroke, seizure, and then an overall dependency on these different areas. And if I didn't say it a minute ago, some examples of stimulants are Adderall, Ritalin, synthetic marijuana, cocaine, meth, methamphetamine, ecstasy, caffeine, nicotine. The next area would be a depressant. So a depressant is any substance that temporarily reduces the function or nervous activity of the body. So the biggest thing here is it slows brain function, slows pulse and breathing, lowers blood pressure. So just like a stimulant was an upper, a depressant is going to bring the body really down. So you may over time initially have a feeling of euphoria where it's just calm, but you're going to have long-term issues with sluggishness. You may have some visual disturbances. It's really going to change the body and slow everything down, everything relating to blood pressure, all different systems. And because of that, you may actually have the opposite of what happened with a stimulant. You may have weight gain. You may have insomnia, not from the heightened system, but because you're so sluggish that you don't have any activity through the day, so you don't really feel tired. Some examples of some depressants are Xanax, Valium, and alcohol. So hallucinogen is any drug that causes hallucinations, images, visions, or voices. Okay, so any type of hallucinogen may be some sort of mushroom, myriad of things that really are going to impact the body and put me in some altered mind states. An opioid. Okay, so an opioid is basically an addictive substance derived from an opium poppy. We're going to talk about this one, hallucinogens, cannabis, and alcohol in subsequent lessons. But opiates versus opiates are a really interesting thing in regard to mixing of drugs and how those are delivered to the body. Okay, so cannabis is kind of a drug on its own. Basically, it's dried buds or leaves from a cannabis plant. Okay, so the addictive and troublesome part of the marijuana plant is the THC. And these different types, this THC or marijuana is smoked, vaped, or ingested, and it's done intentionally for the intoxicating effect. So we're going to kind of finish up here. Well, tons of different types of drugs, tons of different types of drug categories. What we want to think about too is the idea of a gateway drug. And going back to different types of behaviors that are going to put me in different situations, we need to understand that there is this theory of a gateway drug. So there are some drugs that may be not seen as dangerous as some other drugs, like marijuana or alcohol, may not be as viewed as dangerous as like heroin or cocaine. But the presence of me in a situation where people are smoking marijuana or drinking alcohol may put me at risk for moving up the chain and trying something that's a little bit more dangerous, such as the cocaine. So a gateway drug is just a drug that's going to potentially allow me to be around a situation where it put me in an opportunity to use another different types of drugs. And some common stages of substance abuse. Going back to this whole theory of gateway drugs, oftentimes we see people go from no use, then they start to experiment with alcohol, and then move into marijuana. Because of the tendency to use alcohol and marijuana, they may meet different people, they may be around different situations where they're then exposed to some other illicit drugs. Once those come through, they're looking for even more high, then they may actually begin to mix drugs, do them different times of day, And then finally, they may actually look to more prescribed substances that are even more harsh on the body. Okay, so this is lesson one, an overall kind of general topic here. At the end of this lesson, as you're talking to your athletes, really think about how you can kind of summarize everything, maybe have a little check for understanding, maybe go back a couple slides, touch on a different thing. You can take a picture of the slide, just screenshot it and send it via Teamworks. But basically what we're trying to do is surround the athletes with a lot of different types of substance abuse education here. Okay, so drug and alcohol substance abuse lesson one.